Okay, so I get asked an amount, not much, but an amount, how you build Jarl. And people come to me with a few questions about, does this go in, does that go in, why are you running this, why are you not running this, can I do whatever? And I thought I'd sort of try and address a little bit of that in a video, because one, seems like good content and something I actually talk about, because I have the knowledge, I like to share the knowledge. And two, because anytime I try and record a Jarl video to post from Talishar Games, it's just a 50-minute slog, and I'm not sure anyone wants to watch that. Whereas this feels like a way to, interact with other Flesh and Blood players in a meaningful way. So I'm going to start off with Fatigue Jarl. I would say he basically breaks down into three things: full fatigue, a ice-based sort of aggro deck, and a ice-earth hybrid kind of mid-range build. And there are some other things which I'll kind of try and cover as well, but they are the three main archetypes. They all have an advantage and a disadvantage. I think one is clearly the best. That is fatigue, and it's what I like the most, but we're going to launch in with that. This is, I want to say, fairly typical. This is literally my list, bear in mind, so some people will differ on their opinions on bits and pieces, but starting point of, it's just got a really fixed package of tunic, gauntlets. You don't have to run gauntlets, you can run some of the other Guardian stuff, I go gauntlets because they're free, as it were, as in monetary wise, because you just own them if you own Jarl. But the generic Guardian ones that stop things getting +1s are actually very, very good, and I would happily run those as well. I'm playing how to describe it, a flex on my fatigue build, which is why I've gone for these, which I'll kind of address in a minute. But basically, quick dogs, flexes, gauntlets. Tunic is basically mandatory, and then this goes for Rampart and Titan's Fist. I believe I have played builds where I run a two-handed weapon. It can be very helpful, and I believe I currently actually am on one and have not updated this. But this, basically, Rampart is your shield for fatigue because you are just wanting to prevent and prevent and prevent. And with Tunic and Rampart, you get a free prevent every 3 turns. The Rampart also does things like it helps you convert Remembrance into block into a lot of decks. It lets you mess around with, you can use a Pulse and a Rampart together. You can use Expose the Elements and Rampart together is very, very strong tech, in my opinion. You've just got a lot of ways sort of to use up those extra resources on turns where you can't Tunic. But the main thing is, if you're trying to play, literally a 30-turn game, this is a 10-block item, and nothing in the game is as good as that. So, sort of bear that in mind. Coronet Peak is... it's basically tech for certain decks because it doesn't do a lot into some matchups. You just have to kind of know which ones it's right for. The most obvious thing is Syndra. Syndra, you cannot in any way race on a fatigue build, obviously, and you're trying to fatigue. You end up just playing this miserable, frankly, game where your aim is for them to run out of cards and for you to have 2 Everblooms and a Heart of Fyandal left in your deck. So the be-all and end-all of any deck that you can manage it into is you peak every single turn without fail, basically. You would break off from peaking if you absolutely couldn't let a last on hit land and you had to use up your blue, but you want to peak every single turn. And the reason you want to peak every single turn is just you are slowing the game. They're playing a 3-card hand into your 3-card hand, and if you sort of maths out the leakage of that, aggro decks average. Let's try again. Good aggro decks average something like 12 to 16 damage, and they're going for 16 damage turns. You average a maximum of 12 block. If you drag them down to 12 damage turns and you blocking 9, you leak less. They run out of steam in a more gradual manner where your life gain kicks in more, and it just sort of plays well overall. So that's the entire point of Coronet Peak. It is not some cunning tech into everyone. It is dead in the Guardian mirrors. I would argue it's not particularly good into Verdance. There's a lot of places you don't really want it. If I just quickly go down to my inventory, I've run Crown a lot. I still do. I think Crown might currently be in my build. As I say, I just opened at what I knew was definitely fatigue list. Arcanite Skullcap can be a choice because it blocks 3, and blocking is just good, but Crown is also good. I had Arcanite in this build because this build can go to AB7, and it aims to actually grind out Verdance games, which it can do. It's a pain, but it can do it. The defining thing I would say with the fatigue lists is you've got copies of Fiddler's Green, you've got Sigils of Solace, and you've got your Everbloom and Heart of Feyendal kind of finishing combo, and you can get the game down to a point where you have Titan's Fist, 2 Everblooms and a Heart, and you just use your 4-card hand cycle to go gain 3 life, block 1, attack for 4, and it's 8 value every single turn without using any cards up from your deck. So you aim to just block the entire game out into those fatigue matchups and then cycle them like that. It's a good strategy. It's how you win some matchups, period. What I would say about the build I'm currently playing is I try to flex more. So on top of the obvious thing of like run Oakenhold, because Oakenhold is great, I've got a couple of Mangles in there. They go really well with the Gauntlets, obviously. I've got Sea and Seeds, which are incredibly common, but I'm also running Boulder Drop. I have not got Elemental Strike, Enlightened Strikes in this deck as a preference choice at the moment. There is nothing wrong with them. They are perfectly good. They maybe should be there instead of the Boulder Drops, but I really like the kind of flex the Boulder Drops have given me in this build. I've had a lot of success with them. E-Strike has the advantage of having the words "go again" bolted to it. If you are playing into ally heavy stuff and you are needing to clear angels or zombies, they're really good. Go again access for Guardians is a huge thing that they would need more of, but I've just found in the fatiguey builds I'm not as fussed because I'm just going to grind and block and grind and block. Only one remembrance. A second one would be perfectly viable, but I only feel like I ever crave having one. If there was sideboard space, I'd put a second in. The most notable thing when you're playing Fatigue, obviously, is basically everything is a free block. Your exception is Fruits of the Forest. And that's just because it's a really valid all-round card. You could still find excuses to cut this, I think, but I like it in terms of it's an extra 6 points of life gain in a deck that really likes being able to restabilize its life. It pitches blue is good, and it costs 3, which is just important for Titan's Fist. I just find it a really good all-rounder. Because things like the prison matchup, for example, being able to bonk for 4 more reliably is actually very, very important. We have a surprising amount of non-hammer enabling cards. Your Everblooms, your Crumbles, your Channels, none of them actually proc it. So you've kind of got all that. But you can sort of see how the deck sort of wants to go. It has got the ability to flex. Like, I'm running the max amount of Dominate cards I can. I've got the Terra Sunder still in. You should never not run Terra Sunder, by the way. But, it's deliberately leaning on Macho Grandes and Glacials rather than necessarily going into Thunderquakes as a preference, because you can't fatigue every matchup, and I would rather concede a little bit of the sort of finer points of fatiguing to be able to flex quite heavily, and this deck can flex and it can beat other decks up, which, you know, as I say, it's important into certain matchups where you have to throw hands, you can't just tank. You know, other Guardians is probably the best example. If you just try and fatigue out of the Guardian, you will run out of deck, because you need to block 3 cards for every card they play, and they will have a 6 damage hammer, and they will grind you. That's basically the gist of this. As I say, like the updates I would make to this list that I've currently got up is basically just that I would stick a 2-handed weapon in here. Everything else is kind of fine, but there's so many options. Like if I go back to my decks, I think this is the one that I updated. So basically the same deck here, as you can sort of see, but yeah, you can see here I moved to sort of playing Crown. I've been trying out Righteous Cleansing, which has its place, but I don't think is worth it in the fatigue match. Stalagmite I tried out for a little bit of extra sort of can I flex with it. I don't like it, and it won't be staying. But there is a Summit in there, and Summit lets you bonk quite heavily. I'm quite a big fan of Summit in the fatigue as like a flex option for just hitting, because your opponent has to respect this and double block it once you've got a piece of equipment. I think that'll do for covering kind of the fatigue concept. This one's an ice build. Again, just bear in mind these are kind of a bit of my take on them. So you've got some civic steps in here because I didn't want to have to pay out resources to block. It's on Stalagmite because it's just wanting the block and the frostbite to slow other people down. You're still on Tunic because Tunic fixes a lot of Guardian problems. Still on Gauntlet because it's running Mangles, and then it's got a Titan's Fist, and it's got I've actually got Sledge and Summit in the inventory of this. I don't know that I need them both really, but they're both there because I kind of had the space. Running fairly standard things. I think one of my Sync Willers is in inventory just because I was trying to keep it a tight 60, but again the boulder drops. Because it's ice, Icy Encounter is actually very good. It's got the ice keyword, so if you can force people to lose a piece of equipment, this becomes amazing because it's just like creates 2 frostbites. You can pummel onto it, and Icy Encounter pummel is beautiful because they lose a card and get 2 frostbites, and that's huge. You can Ice Quake into it is really strong because it costs 2, so pitch 1 blue and got Ice Quake into Icy Encounter. You have a potential for 4 frostbites there. Like, it's a really big amount of stuff. Most people run 2 blizzards. I was on 3 because I just don't find them to be a problem when you're playing this type of thing. Spinal Crushers are in this build. A lot of people are not on Spinal Crush, and I'm always a little bit surprised because it really, really ruins the day of a lot of aggro decks because it just says skip a turn. I love Spinal Crush, and I think everyone should always play it forever. I've even been looking at kind of cram it into the Fatigue deck, but the Fatigue deck really doesn't need it. Apart from that, you'll see a lot of overlapping cards. Like, you just run things like Channel because you might play them. You rarely do in this meta, but you might. You can kind of see it's leaning a little less on the Dominate and a little more into kind of the efficient 6s, where if I'm going to play these, they're actually more playable. Though, truth be told, you really don't want to play... You never want to throw a Cranial Crush at someone. Thunderquake heaving is fine. If you end up with too many cards in your hand, heaving a Quake is decent because then you can Quake for 3 the next turn. But it's much of a muchness. You've got your Winter's Bites to take cards and give them more Frost Bites. It's everything you expect from an ice build, really. I kind of put some batters into the inventory because I felt like this deck really needs more into gravy. And you often find that things like Rouse and Zealous Belting make it into the decks. I kind of dropped them from this because I just didn't find myself wanting them. And I feel that's a playstyle thing. A lot of people get really hopped up on you need those cards, and they are good, and they have places where they can be very, very good. And again, like into gravy, they can be very, very helpful for trying to clear a board state. But the problem is, if you're trying to clear a board state, that means that gravy's already swung at you for 14. So my opinion a lot of the time is you're going to be wanting to block with that portion of your hand anyway. It's very hard to use Go Again and Guardian to kick out of that minion train. And if I was going to, I'd be putting in, Scar for a Scar type stuff to one card clear rather than to do that. But that's a relatively typical ice build. You're on pummels, you're on I love Icequake, by the way. It's actually one of my favourite ice cards. I love just the I'm going to whack you and you're going to be slowed down and I'm going to do more damage, and the way it combos with CNCs and things, love it. And then the last of the three real types is what I'm calling Dirt Jarl, but it's more hybridy. It's got a lot of ice in there anyway. It's running like a tilling, felling, plounder package. What you often find is you do actually not get that much use out of the Earth cards because you end up having to block with the early ones. It's a 1 in 3 chance of getting a Cadaverous Tilling before you find your fellings and your plows, and you never want to throw the small ones. So it's really a case of I've played a lot of games where you just block with all your fellings and never use them, and that's fine because they're 3 block. It's not a bad move. This is on E-Strikes because it just wants crashing aggro, in my opinion, at points. And again, the classic Guardian thing, they block for free, they're never bad. But, tillings, fellings, etc., where you can't really fell in pummel, unfortunately, because the felling tries to tuck the pummel. But, you've got a lot of options with the others to maybe get some really big play out of that. You can obviously Icequake into felling and stuff, and again, that's pretty nice because 11 damage, lose a card and take a frostbite, or maybe even 2 frostbites, is just solid. This is the most fun Jarl, I think, if I'm being honest, because it gets to do some quite degenerate stuff sometimes. You can go into an Oakenhold and then follow the Oakenhold out with landing a felling the next turn, and then follow that out with a, something else horrible. The options are somewhat endless. Your Terra Sunders are a lot weaker in this, and you need to be careful because you've only got in this build at least basically 5 Guardian cards. Your Okens and your Mangles. Your Terra Sunder is mostly in there because it's blue, and then it's a way to use Titan's Fist to disrupt. You can get some nice plays off it, but you need to be aware your plows, your fellings, your E-Strikes, your Command and Conquers, your Tillings don't work with it. And again, this is a reason why I'm tempted in this build to ditch the E-Strikes and go for something like Boulder Drop, because Terra Sunder Boulder Drop is disgusting. Your opponent can block with 1 card from hand and then loses 3. And that is basically skip a turn. It's really nice if you can line it up. The thing about this deck is it's erratic, I think I would say. It is not as comfortable and stable, and some games you will draw trash hands and you will have a horrible time, and some games you will draw hilarious hands and you'll have a lovely time. But for somebody who's wanting to play Jarl but wants it to be spicy, this could be the build for you. As I say, I'd be tempted to drop the E-Strikes personally, but I mean, it's just a good card. It always will be. But hopefully that kind of gives people some ideas on sort of the different things. There's a lot of overlapping card pool. You're always going to see Frozen to Deaths. You're always going to see Everblooms. You're probably always going to see Tranal Lake Frigids, but you do get options and variants in there. You know, like, are you going to run Earth cards? Are you going to go Guardian card heavy? Are you fatiguing? Are you mid-ranging? Jarl has a lot of options. He's a really open hero, which is one of the reasons I'm always drawn to the Ice Earth Guardians. You know, I played old him for most of his lifespan, and then I've eyeballed Jarl for a lot of his. I had a big Verdance period, so I didn't move on to him immediately, but I've been on Jarl solidly for 4 or 5 months now, I think, and doing well with him. I have not lost an actual game in real life with him yet. I am at 100% win rate in tournaments, so doing well. Will have jinxed myself. I'll be able to tell you next time I record a video. But hopefully this has been useful. I'll see you in the next one.